Today, we have some good news for you. As it turns out, finding the sweet spot of your snare drum or any of your drums is a whole lot easier than you might think. Let's face it, no drum is a one-trick pony, but we can be fooled into thinking so and thereby end up with blind spots about what these drums are capable of for a lot of different reasons. This can include marketing from companies that we respect, even endorsement deals from players that we love or whose sound we love. This can also include social media. This might be the most dangerous because we're really choosing exactly what we see, and it can define what we think is good and what we think is terrible. The quickest way to boredom with our instruments is an ignorance, misunderstanding, or lack of experience with what they're actually capable of. And this can result in frustration, wanting to get rid of your drum, thinking you need a new drum, or generally feeling like you just don't know what you're doing. Particularly for today, please stick with us to the end of this episode because the whole arc of what we're trying to get at here is contained throughout the course of this one. So please hang on till the very end. Let's go through some examples. For instance, let's consider what happens when we leave out a really fundamental variable about the drum that we're trying to get a good sound out of. Consider someone who wants to cook pasta. They've made recipes in the past that included pasta, and one of those said, you cook pasta for 12 minutes, so they throw it in the water and they cook it for those 12 minutes. The end result is that one kind of pasta is going to be perfectly al dente, another one is going to be overcooked and falling apart, and a third one is so hard and undercooked that you can't even come close to eating it yet. They are leaving out a very fundamental variable, which is that there's a lot of kinds of pasta. I mean, you don't have to necessarily be a pasta aficionado to know that there's more than one kind. Because of the shape, thickness, or ingredients involved, those different kinds of pasta can have pretty significantly different cooking times to get a desired result. Another pretty challenging situation you might find yourself in is, rather than ignoring a variable, deciding that one variable in your drum is the only one that matters, keeping everything else the same, and then wondering why your results aren't what you're looking for. A lot of us have been there. Imagine someone who is playing their drum, they're starting to get tired of it, so they sell it and they get a new one, but then they tune the heads to the exact same tuning numbers that they did for the last one. And they're excited for a little while, but after some time goes by, they get sick of it, and they repeat the process. Some people call this gas or gear acquisition syndrome. What we're really talking about here is the idea that the drum is somehow the only variable that matters, completely ignoring tuning, heads, and everything else that goes into it. This can actually result in a sort of addiction to the feeling of acquiring a new instrument, the excitement about showing it off online and to your friends, or the idea that you are now legit or authentic or professional because you have this newer, better, faster, whatever drum. Every drum you have contains multitudes, so it is really worth considering the idea that the thing that the drum is not its sound, and there is a lot more that goes into it than what it's made of, how big it is, or whose name is on the side of it. Now for the big question, how do we know that we have blind spots? They're literally called blind spots. Imagine, if you will, a small child, let's say a 4-year-old, trying to express themselves with the vocabulary that they have. This is going to be adequate for some things like asking for a glass of water, but if you want to win a debate with an adult or, open a bank account, you're going to need more than that. In the ensuing years between childhood and adulthood, our vocabulary grows daily just by virtue of our environment. It grows the most in the scholastic environment that we're often in as children, but at some point we leave that, go out into the world, and it's choose your own adventure time. What do you want to do with this knowledge and vocabulary that you have now? This is the point in life where we get to start to define who we are as individuals and become the people that we want to be. This is true of verbal vocabulary. It is also true of vocabulary of sound on the instrument, not just how you play it, but also the choices you make, both in tuning, instruments themselves, and the context that you make your music in. Everywhere in life, you can minimize your blind spots through experience, and specifically experience where you're really paying attention and keeping track of what you learn along the way. By the way, great example. Have you been keeping track of what's going on with the snare sound in this episode? Sounds like an awful lot of different sweet spots to me. If you like different kinds of pasta in your life, take the time to understand the requirements of each one so that you can get exactly the texture and result that makes you happy. This is exactly the same as applying the identical tuning numbers to every drum that comes in front of you and then wondering why it works sometimes and doesn't work other times. We have to address this as a variable, not a set and forget prescription. We specifically don't do that, and we argue that you don't do that either because it is a fundamental limitation that gets applied to people's tuning schemes for their instruments and makes them judge their sound, their instruments, and the music they make with a yawning blind spot right in the center of it. If you've been with us for any length of time, you know that we have had a lot of snare drums through this studio, and if we were to apply the same prescription to all of them, we would be completely discounting the differences that make them unique and interesting and that make drums fun in the first place. We really also want to double down on this thing of buying a new drum being equal to buying a new sound, because it really isn't. What you need to be thinking about is how it's making you feel to get that drum, and then consider other ways to get that fix that are cheaper, exciting, and wildly varied right in front of you. Every snare drum contains multitudes, not just multitudes of okay sounds, but many sweet spots, many options, many feels and textures, and whether some of them are things you like or not, the more you know about it, the more options you're going to have. It also bears repeating, if someone tells you to tune that snare side head as tight as it will go, and you follow that, you are immediately discounting a massive range of that instrument, and in that range, a lot of really great sounds that could be super inspiring for you. Vocabulary is key to both self-expression and understanding the world around you. If we are experiencing limitations in either what we can understand or what we can express, then we're going to struggle when it comes to getting really down to specifics about how we feel, what kind of sound we want to make, and who we want to make that sound with. As we mature into adults, the worst thing we can do is choose not to go on any adventure at all and stay inside of that safe little zone that we know works and is okay all of the time. This doesn't mean that you have to love every single drum sound you've ever heard. Instead, we ask that you immerse yourself in sounds that are unfamiliar to you and consider that the context can be what makes a sound good or appropriate or authentic. If you're a person that loves a certain side of the frequency range and tuning of your drum, there's nothing wrong with checking out the other end, even if it feels inappropriate based on your experience or your tastes. Ultimately, tastes change over time, and musical contexts that you might be in are going to change as well. What does all of this have to do with sweet spots? We started out talking about that. Sweet spots are an indicator of these very blinders that we're talking about. If you think your drum has a sweet spot, that means that you are ignoring variables with that instrument, because the bottom line is no drum only makes one sound, and if you want it to make other sounds that please you, exploration is key. If at the end of the day you are a somewhat inexperienced drummer, you're coming up, you're learning what you like and what you don't like, this is a perfect time to remain open-minded and consider that what you think of as a good drum sound is just one sound. And context is key, maturity is key, your preferences are going to change, and understanding what goes into other sounds besides that one favorite one that you have is fundamental to understanding the capacity of your drums. If this all seems super overwhelming, don't worry. All we're asking you to do is consider the possibility that you are ignoring variables in your tuning, the possibility that you are overthinking one single variable in the way that you treat your drums, and that your listening vocabulary could stand to grow a little bit, bring in some inspiration, and broaden your palette to other possibilities.